Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here and I'm back with another video for Honeybee Stamps. Today we're going to be using the Radiant Stencil die and then the Anchors, the Soul stamps, and I thought I was going to use the dies. I didn't end up using the dies. In hindsight, I kind of wish I would have used the dies, but we'll talk about that when we get to that. So what we're doing today is mass producing. We are making multiple cards. And so I have like a rainbow of cardstock here, as well as some gray, and then just the white card bases that eventually I will get them glued to. Why am I showing you all of this? I'm showing you all of this because I find that when I'm going to mass produce, it is easiest to have all of my supplies done, cut, and on hand. And then also stamp positioner. Make your life so much easier. The reason that it's called a MISTI is it's like the must-have stamping tool is what that MISTI portion stands for. Most important stamping tool, something like that. It's true. I love my MISTI. When they first came out, I thought that I didn't need one. That's insanity. I totally love it. I am so glad that I purchased it. I actually donated for it for in a white elephant game. But anywho, so in doing that, I have my stamps and my sentiment lined up, and I am just going to knock these out one after another. I do it the same way every way. I'll show it to you a couple of times with my anti-static tool. And I use a bag. You can use one of the shaker tools or a dryer sheet if that's what you got on hand, just to get the static off the paper. And then I stamped in Versamark ink, which if you're new to crafting is just a clear sticky ink that the embossing powder sticks to. I'm using white embossing powder, and I'm just going to sprinkle that on and then flip it over because obviously this is a larger image. And I just want to make sure everything is totally covered. And then I will brush, that's why can I not enunciate? Anyway, brush off the excess with a dry paintbrush. If I really need to get like in between the letters, I will use also a craft pick, which is a Laura Basson tip that I picked up from her. But anywho, once that's done and you've gotten all of the excess off, you're just going to heat set that with your heat gun. You want to make sure that it's completely smooth, shiny, all melted before you're done heat setting. If you preheat, that will cut down on warping. It will also cut down on warping if you move your heat gun across the entirety of your cardstock, so that it doesn't get super hot in one area and not hot at all in another area. And then so we're just going to go through and heat emboss these. Now, why am I making multiples? Well, I will tell you. The last time that we spoke, I told you Eric had made the recommendation to me, since I was having no mojo, that maybe it would be a good idea for me to make some cards for the helpers right now in our current situation. And so I wanted to be able to make a bunch of cards relatively quickly. But the problem is, I get bored with that. I'm not going to lie to you. So in order to kind of break up that boredom, I like to make multiple colors so they don't all look the same. And then I'm also going to put some distress ink on there to kind of, break up that as well. Just so it's not all, stamp, emboss, move on to the next, stamp, emboss, and move on to the next. Also, the distress inking, you'll see, really helps to create a little bit of contrast so that that white embossing powder stands out, which on some colors isn't super important because the white creates enough of a contrast. But on brighter colors, like you'll see when we do the yellow or the green, it is a little bit more difficult to see the white. Now, you can certainly do other colors, whatever floats your boat. I don't have a lot of colored embossing powders. I just don't use a lot. Oh, let's talk about the sticker on the back of this for one quick second. I could not get it off, and it was starting to kind of tear my cardstock. I also realized it was going to be glued down and that I need not to care about it. So the sticker stayed on the back. I'm not worried about it. So if you have that problem, I suggest you also don't worry about it. Nobody's going to see it, except for, if you're doing a YouTube video like I am right now. But yeah, so it just really was very nice to, I used to make multiples all the time and just switch up the colors, just to like practice coloring images and things like that. I have since gotten away from it, especially since I like more of the, to do the scene cards. Those aren't cards you're making multiples of typically, because they're very involved. But this, so the way the cards are right now, and you'll see, a couple of different, times, like I told you. I think the yellow one might be the last one I show you. that just the heat embossing is, if you have enough contrast, is totally fine. You could stop there and just mass produce them that way. You don't have to keep adding layers to it like I'm going to. And then there's one even further that I was going to do that I didn't, which would have been to die cut out the anchor and put it on foam tape, and then with the anchor removed, do the glimmer paste. I did not do that, but that would also be another option to just kind of like a variation on the card, just depending on how much time you want to spend on them. So these 8 cards took me about, I don't know, an hour and a half from start to finish. So not a lot of time for 8 cards, at least not for me anyway. But like I said, so here we're doing the yellow, and you'll see once it's heat embossed, it is a little bit, there's not as much contrast as with the other, the same with the other colors, with the white and the yellow. There just isn't. It's not completely illegible, but it's much more readable once we add the distress ink on top of it. So yeah, I did also talk to you about the last video about Nathan and I making rainbows, just very, very briefly. And I kind of wanted to touch back on that, just to tell you our process about it. So I talked to him about doing it. Roxanne, like I said, had made the comment. I thought it was a wonderful thing to do. And then we also included a note on the back of ours. So we, here, back to the distress inking. I did 2 colors for each one except for the gray. The gray I wanted to show you, if you wanted to skip the step, the card would still be super beautiful with just the glimmer paste and the embossing. That the distress inking isn't a necessary step, especially if you don't own distress inks. And if you don't, sorry, I keep jumping all over the place. I'm going to tell you about the rainbow thing. We'll come back to that, but let me find this. So this stamp set from Honeybee is called Anchors the Soul, and there are such good sentiments. I went with the very simple "We are praying for you," but there's hope anchors the soul. Life's roughest storms prove to strengthen our anchors, and then there's one that says Hebrews 6:19. And okay, so anywho, back to the rainbow thing. So I talked to Nathan about doing the rainbows and explained to him kind of like what we talked about before, the story of Noah's Ark and all of that, and that it would be a good way for us to kind of connect with our neighbors and give everybody a little something to look forward to kind of thing. And so we sat down and stamped them out and then colored them. But I also knew that I was going to have to refill my markers. I'm terrible about that. Like, I know some people have a schedule and they weigh them and all this stuff. I don't do any of that. I'm not hardly that organized. Like, good for people who can do that. But I am not one of them. So anyway, so I picked out just rainbow colors. We didn't do regular Kelly coloring. We just did 1 coat coloring. And then we had to refill them. So if you've never refilled Copic markers, which my son had not ever refilled Copic markers, so I was showing him how I do that, and he was like, can I take the little nibs out? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So we kind of had like an assembly line thing going on. And then I straight up overfilled my R29. R29 is lipstick red. And it is, if you color with Copics, you know that red is very, very difficult to move if you get out of the lines. And so I overfill it. It is dripping out of the other end. And I had put down like paper towels and stuff in case that happened. And so I'm trying to like blot up what I can. It looks like somebody's been murdered in my kitchen. And then I, wipe it up with paper towel, and then I realize there's like 2 drips on the table, and I go to wipe it up, and I don't realize that the alcohol ink has actually soaked through the paper towel in my hand. So I go to wipe it up, and I just like this huge red smear across my table. And the table is a lighter color wood. We do have plans to refinish it. But I was like, oh my goodness gracious. In the middle of all of this, I'm also FaceTiming with my mom. And I like have her propped up on some card bases in my coffee. And she's like, what is going on over there? And I was like, it looks like we're slaying people willy-nilly here in the kitchen. Nathan's trying to point out all the spots to me. Eventually we get that cleaned up and then back to coloring. And then the poor kid picked the red marker, and I didn't have time to tell him to take the back off so that it wouldn't bleed all over the place, which that's the trick, by the way. If you have an overfilled marker, take the other end of it off. And then it does something. I had read once that it equalizes the pressure, and then I had read in another place that they aren't pressurized. So I don't know what it does, but it works. Okay? It's magic. It's unicorn dust and fairies and rainbows. Whatever the reason, it totally works. Take the cap off the other end and it won't bleed out all over your project. Okay? Okay. So then he did that, and it like bled out all over the place, and he was super upset. And so we did have a few casualties as far as the rainbows went, but mostly it went okay. And then I had bought a pack of I think they were like die cuts with a view or something years ago, because I wanted colored envelopes. And now I would just buy, like Hero Arts or whatever. But back then, here, make sure we pay attention to the yellow one, because you'll be able to see how much better you can see the embossing once we're done with the distress inking, like how much more contrast there is. So I had bought it and not realizing that the note cards were actually colored and not the envelopes. The envelopes were white. It was like a pack of 50. So we used those, is what we did. We went on Google Maps. We counted up all the houses on our street to see how many we would have to make. I think it was 45. We made 50, to include our house and then have some extras as well. And then the next day, we went for a walk and we passed them out. Now, we practiced good social distancing. We went to the door. I taped them up there with, what is that? The medical tape. That's like the low tack tape. Tape them to their doors, knocked or rang the doorbell, and then we would go to the next house. Some people answered the door right away, so like we were in the driveway and we'd be able to be like, "Hi, we left something on your door for you," and other people didn't. Then we also, like I said, included a note on the back. I'm going to very quickly read you the little note that we wrote on the back. And then I'm going to tell you about what we found when we went on our walk the next day, because that's a really exciting part. So it says, "Hi neighbor, we moved into the neighborhood back in November and thought once the weather got warmer, we'd be able to get out more and meet some of you. Apparently God had different plans, because here we are doing the complete opposite instead. Since we're all in this together, we thought maybe we could do something else together too. On the opposite side of this card, you'll see a rainbow. Rainbows have always been a symbol of hope, and we think we could all use a little bit of that right now. We know we are definitely doing more walking recently and thought maybe some of you are too. If you're willing to, please put this rainbow up somewhere visible from the sidewalk. Then we can all look for the rainbows whenever we walk. We included a rainbow in case you can't make one, but if you want to make your own, that would be wonderful too. Want to move it around every once in a while? Great. Don't have time for that? That's cool too. We'd also like to let you know we're happy to help if you need something immunocompromised or higher risk. Call us. We'll help. Living alone and feeling very lonely? Write us a letter or give us a call. We'd love to chat. Have a little one looking for a pen pal? Hey, us too. Ours is 6, and how cool would it be when after this is over they can hang out in person? And if you were thinking that's too much, you don't want to be a burden, we hand stamped and colored 50 rainbows, folks. We want to help." And then, we signed it, Eric, Kelly, and Nathan, with our address so people knew we were actually from the neighborhood, and put my cell phone number on there. So, hold on, we got to go back to the card. So here we're doing the glimmer paste portion. Now I chose Moonstone Glimmer Paste, which is a clear, white-ish color. So basically it just takes on the color of whatever it's on top of. And so because I chose this particular color, I can go right over the anchor and everything is still legible as far as the sentiment. You can still see the design of the anchor, and you can only really catch the glitter in certain light. If you wanted to do colored glimmer paste, which they have and is beautiful, I would recommend that you do what I talked about earlier. Die cut the anchor out, put the glimmer paste on the background, and then insert your anchor back in. Because if you try to go over the white embossing with color, you're not going to be able to see the anchor or the sentiment. Okay, so then we're back to the glittering. I did notice as I kept working that some of the holes got clogged with glimmer paste because it does dry very quickly. So if you're doing more than these 8, or if you're super particular about the way that the lines look, you may want to clean it halfway through. Okay, now back to the thing. So then this is what we did. We passed out the rainbows. We met some neighbors. And then the next day we went for a walk. And so when we headed out for the walk, we were like, how many do you think you'll see? How many do you think you'll see? We were all kind of making our little guesses. I knew we wouldn't see all of them. I knew that. And that's totally fine because it's not for them then. And that's okay. I don't need it to be for everybody. It's for the people who needed it. So right away, after we passed them out, I did start to get some text messages from neighbors, thanking us and kind of reaching out. The next day when we went for the walk, we started, counting up the rainbows, and then we started seeing the ones that people made themselves. There's a super cool one that they made like out of wood and put in their front yard. And so like when I saw it and pointed it out to Peanut, they happened to be outside in their driveway and they're like, thank you so much for that. It really brightened up our day. We saw another couple of kids who had drawn rainbows all down their sidewalk. And then they had a huge rainbow in their driveway. We had some other ones that they drew their own picture rainbows and then put them on their doors. The neighbors that are like catty corner from us actually recreated the card. So the honeybee sentiment that we put on it was the hugs, kisses, and rainbow wishes. And so she actually drew a rainbow in her driveway and then wrote out the sentiment, which was awesome to see. So it was just so joyful. Like, it just made my heart so happy. And it made my heart so happy that it touched other people, but also to show Nathan, like, if you take the time to reach out to other people and to put yourself out there, that it's not going to be everyone and it's not always going to work, but there are going to be some people that you can touch and that you can make that connection with and that you can love, the way that God has told us to love our neighbors. And literally they're our neighbors, not just like, regular people out there in life, but like our literal neighbors in our development. So we did just get to go for one walk. That was yesterday. And so I'm excited to see if, there's more out there, or if people move them around or, what have you. And I'm sure that it probably won't go on forever, but I'm excited that, at least we got one day out of it and it seemed to touch some other people. So I'm hoping with these cards that we're making now, I'm making them for essential workers, for helpers, for healthcare workers, first responders, all of those people, that they will also be touched. So here, this is after they're all done and dry. That gray one is the one that doesn't have any inking on the background. Still super pretty. The rest of them do have inking. And like I said, you can see that even though we've put the sparkle on there, which is not going to come off because it's the glimmer paste, it's still totally legible, the anchor and the sentiment. So that is it for me. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you're inspired to do something similar, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye.